My Fairy Queen? Nope, still My Fairy King, this time revisited. Crown Jewels, coming up next. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Crown Jewels. I'm your host, PLD, here on the PLD Projects Network. This is, of course, the podcast where I'm taking you on a journey through the entirety of the Queen catalog, song by song, every version of every song, as we try to pare it down, discover which is the best version or the titular crown jewel version of each song to slide into our ultimate playlist. Still on our special part of the journey, we pause where we were in the Flash Gordon soundtrack, where we're revisiting Queen 1, due to the recent release of the Queen 1 Collector's Edition box set. Got to go over those tracks again because we have new versions to listen to, new tracks to see if they can take the place of the ones who originally won during our initial season of the podcast. If you remember the original episode, we had two versions to listen to, the original album version and the 1973 BBC session, which initially had one. We have three more versions to listen to, the 2024 remix, the Trident backing track in development, and the backing track version. Now, if you've been here before, you know what I'm going to say. If you haven't been here before, well, how do we listen to things? Well, I don't want to get a copyright strike or anything nonsense like that. So what we do, in the show notes down below, I will put a Google Doc. On that Google Doc, you will find links to the YouTube versions of everything we're going to listen to. So when I tell you to, I'm going to have you pause me, go to that doc, click on the link, listen to the version, come back, and then we can talk about it. So let's get right into it because we don't have any notes or quotes this time. You want to hear that? You go back to the original My Fairy King episode. We're just listening to the new versions. So first up will be the 2024 mix. Now, I did include the original and the BBC 73 in the links because you might want to listen to those for reference and to compare, contrast. For right now, though, I listened to the original and then the 2024 remix. Come back, and I'll tell you all about it. And there you have it. It's quite a difference. If you've listened to this podcast, you know what I'm about to say. But for those of you who may be listening to the very first episode, the reason why Queen released this box set, in addition to wanting product to release, is they never liked the original sound of the 1973 debut album. They recorded it in Trident Studios, dead hours of the night, having to use these studio setups. The band was never happy with the sound, especially Roger Taylor and his drum mix, it was a very dry sound, a very muddled sound. So he finally got the chance in 2024 to revisit it, to mix it completely different from the ground up, new punchier drums, etc., etc. And this is one of the tracks that I think really benefits from this remixing. As you could probably hear if you listen to the original, then followed up with the 2024 mix. So what's the real difference here? Well, the vocals have real separation. There's crispness, there's clearness, there's these harmonies that are very clear. You can actually hear the differences when Freddie comes in different spots, when Roger has his screams going on, the backing vocals, they're all there and they're not all muddied together like the original version was. You can actually hear the different singular voices at times, but the harmonies aren't at all muddied at all. They're very clear and they're very nice. The drums, obviously, one of the biggest things they wanted to change. Much more pop, much more crisp sound. If you might have a negative sound, is it a little bit more modern sounding? Your miles may vary there. It does have a little bit more of a modern sound to it, but I do feel that it's more that we just haven't heard this before. This is the first time we're hearing the drums in this way. So it does sound a little odd when you listen to it for 40 years like most Queen fans have. But the drums are very much more poppier, much more crisper. And finally, the other big take is the pianos is much more distinctive in this one. You can definitely hear the richness of that piano sound. And you know what? Beyond that, the guitars have that same kind of feel to it. Much more distinctive. You can hear the guitars playing off each other a little bit more. When they go back and forth, there's a little bit less of that cloudiness, a little bit less of that muddiness. You can actually hear where the tracks come in, when they come in. And it's basically, if I had to say anything, it's more crisp, more clear, more punchier. It's a better version overall. So I don't want to get into too many spoilers, but this is definitely better than the original album version. I'm sorry. It is what it is. All right, let's listen to the next couple of versions we have. Next up, the Trident backing track in development. Go to that Google Doc, come back, and I'll talk about it. And we're back, and it is exactly what it says. It is Trident backing track in development. I can never see a world in which this is ever going to be a crown jewel for anybody. This is not the best version of the track. It is not even a complete version of the track, really. However, it is a very important version to listen to. All these backing tracks and developments, these early sessions, they're usually not the best version, but they are very interesting and very worth the price of being put on a new box set. In this case, it's hilarious hearing Freddie making the mistakes that he does. He can't get it quite right. He can't get the rhythm. He's swearing at himself. And as a musician myself, I used to sit down on my father and mother's piano and with a tape recorder, and I would try to record stuff I was writing. And every time I made a mistake, it was bad. This is before the days of Pro Tools, before the days of pitching in. I didn't have any fancy equipment. It was me and the tape recorder. So I'd have to get the song pretty much perfect, at least the initial backing track. And my God, if I made a mistake, I'd get through like the entire song and make a mistake at the end. Oh my God, I was swearing up a storm and I was so pissed. My friends have listened to it and they laughed their ass off. And in hindsight, it's very funny. At the time, I wasn't laughing, but it was very funny. We get to hear the exact same thing. Freddie is one of us. He's a brilliant musician, a brilliant songwriter, a rock icon, rock god, but you know, he's not perfect either. And he had to have these kind of mistakes as he was developing the song. And it's wonderful to hear him be a little mortal at times. It's a phenomenal version to hear. I will say, John actually feels like he's trying to do a little bit more here. I almost feel like he tried to do a lot and then maybe toned it down a little bit as the backing track went on. For a track that's so deep and rich, John can get a little lost, I think, at times. His bass can get a little lost with everything else going on. And here is pretty crystal clear what he's doing. He's doing a lot of movement. It's kind of fun to hear. So, all right, one more version to listen to. This is the backing track version. Queen does this with all of their big recent releases. They release a CD of all the tracks, an instrumental form of some kind, or a backing track form. I say backing track because there are some vocals in there, some backing vocals in there, so it's not completely instrumental or karaoke style. So listen to the backing track. You click on that link, come back, and we'll clean it up. Forever! Ooh, yeah! All right, now your miles may vary on these backing tracks or these instrumental type sections, and quite frankly, it's very rare I would even consider these to be in consideration for a crown jewel, because if the best version doesn't have Freddie's lead vocal on, then what are we even doing here, right? However, there are some tracks that definitely benefit more from hearing this than others. Last week's Mad the Swine, for example, didn't do much of the backing track. There's not a whole lot underneath the lead vocal. This track, which makes an extensive use of all these layered different backing vocals, different harmonies, different layered guitar parts, piano parts, you hear a whole lot going on. There is a whole lot going on in the background of this track, and without the Freddie lead vocal, you get to hear that. And beyond that, you get to hear some of those kind of interesting counter lead vocals that Freddie does. They come across as backing vocals as far as the tracks go, but really they're kind of playing off of Freddie's lead vocal a couple of times, and you hear these like lower harmonies from him. It's a brilliant thing to listen to, and it's actually probably one of the better versions. I think this track is one of the better backing tracks we have on this release. So definitely worth to listen to on the box set. I'm so glad it was included in this edition. So, and all right, those are all the versions we're going to listen to today. So now we move on to the nitty gritty. We got to give it a rating, and we got to rank the versions. Now, last time I gave My Fairy King a 10 out of 11, because we always turn things up to 11 here on PLD Project, so it's not 1 to a 10, it's 1 to 11. And I gave it a 10. And so far, I haven't been switching anything around. Usually these remixes, which are better versions most of the time, or I hear different versions, they're usually not enough to bump up the number. I gave it a 10. I have to admit I was tempted to go 10.5, but I think I'll stick with a 10 overall. So we're still sticking at a number 10. Therefore, it is still not going to be in my top 10 Queen-related tracks of all time, because if you're a long-time listener, you know that all 10 are at 10.5 and higher at this point. So now what's left, let's rate these tracks, rate these versions of the tracks from least favorite to the Crown Jewel version. Last time it was the album version, number 2. The BBC session was the Crown Jewel. What do we have now? Okay, my least favorite, my least of the Crown Jewel versions, the Trident backing track and development. Fun to hear. I shouldn't say least favorite, because that's not exactly what's going on here. I'm ranking them as far as what's the best version to listen to. The overall, if you're going to choose a version to say, here, listen to My Fairy King, this is what you're going to listen to. This is where Trident backing track and development falls flat, because you're going to listen to the real version, or a real version. After you listen to the real version, this is something great to come back to and listen to. So, Trident backing track number 5. Up from there, the backing track version. Very interesting, again, especially if you've heard the original. But if I'm going to choose a better version, it's going to be the original. So there we go. We got 3 left to go. From here I go the album version, which is what it was last time, underneath the BBC session. So the big question mark is the BBC session going to hold its title? Or did the 2024 mix do enough to the original album version to vault itself over the top to become its new crown jewel, the new crown jewel of My Fairy King? And folks, your winner. And new crown jewel, that's right. It's going to be the 2024 mix. It did enough for the Christmas, enough for the vocals, enough for the drums, enough for the piano, enough for the guitar, enough of everything, where I feel like it made everything much clearer to me. I initially picked the BBC session, which was kind of a mix of the original album version and some new stuff that was recorded afterwards in the BBC session, including a new lead vocal take. But I hear the vocal much clearer on the 2024 mix. It makes me appreciate them much more than initially I had. So it's close. It's close. But here it is, the 2024 mix, the crown jewel. And that's going to do it for this week's, folks. Thanks so much for checking in. Hope you're with us all the time here. Hope you come back next week. Next week, we are dealing with a big track, one of the biggest on the album. It is A Liar, which was, man, that was one of their big concert staples of the time. And we have 4 more versions to listen to. We have the 2024 mix, the Day Lane Lay demo 2024 mix, the Trident 1 Take 1 unused master, and a backing track version to go along with the original ones, which was the US Edit, BBC Session, 1991 Hollywood Remix, Hammersmith 75, BBC February of 73, Rainbow November 1974, Golders Green 1973, the Day Lane Lay demo, Rainbow March of 1974, and then the last crown jewel, the original album version. That's going to be next week, or possibly the week after, because that's going to might be a bigger episode. Sometimes it'll take me a little longer. It is holiday season. My birthday's coming up. I got a lot of stuff going on. I'm going to try to make it for next week. We'll see what happens. If you like this show, hit that like, hit that subscribe. Leave me some comments. Leave me a 5-star review. I'd love to help. I'd love some help battling the almighty algorithm. I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/PLD Projects. You get this these podcasts definitively will get up early because I record these usually a week in advance. So I usually put them right up when they're done, and you get them earlier than you could possibly even want. Maybe, I don't know. But if you can't support me that way, I completely understand. Everybody, it's a tough time in this world. But you can help by sharing and liking and commenting. That's easy and free to do. So, all right, folks, thank you so much. I will see you next week here on Crown Jewels. My Fairy King says goodbye. Stay tuned next week.